2025 is here and we of course are going to continue creating videos for you. Also, something that never changes is we offer Windows 11 Pro retail keys. For just $12.50, purchase one today and you are good to go for the end of the year when Windows 10 is end of life. This week, the Nintendo Switch 2 was officially announced and it's got the world pretty much divided. The Switch 2, however, promises exciting upgrades, including a larger, faster screen, more storage and improvised performance. The big question is, however, how does it stack up against its biggest competitor, the Steam Deck? This is a handheld console that's already making waves when its PC level performance, massive game library and the ability to run Xbox games, Xbox Game Pass and even PlayStation PC ports. Well, in this video we'll take a closer look at both of these consoles/handhelds, comparing their performance, pricing and long-term value to help you decide which one is the better buy for your gaming needs in 2025. Let's start by comparing the hardware and display of the Nintendo Switch 2 and the Steam Deck. So both consoles bring a lot to the table, but how do their screens, performance and design stack up? The Nintendo Switch 2 features a 7.9-inch LCD screen with 1080p resolution, HDR support and a 120Hz refresh rate for very smooth gameplay. It is a very big step up from the original Switch 720p LCD screen, offering better visuals and a more fluid experience for handheld gaming. However, the Switch 2 LCD display still falls behind the OLED displays found in premium devices like the Steam Deck has to offer, but also the Nintendo Switch 1, which also came with an OLED display. For me, this decision is a little bit strange why Nintendo did go back to the LCD display. The Steam Deck, on the other hand, offers a more variety in choices. It starts with a 7-inch LCD version with 265GB, and it also offers, if you pay a little bit more money, a 7.4-inch OLED display, and this also comes with 512GB or 1TB model of storage. So OLED provides richer colors, deeper blacks, and yeah, it is just, I would say, really big difference versus the LCD, the regular LCD. So the Steam Deck OLED also supports 90Hz refresh rate, which comes pretty close to the 120Hz refresh rate of the Switch 2. In terms of performance, the Switch 2 is powered by a custom NVIDIA processor, and NVIDIA did already announce it supports DLSS 4, ray tracing and G-Sync. The Steam Deck has a custom AMD APU, which then of course supports FSR 4. Both are pretty similar techniques to get extra FPS, get great upscaling, even while it's not necessarily needed, I would say for a handheld, at least the extra frame generations is very nice to have on a handheld. Because, let's face it, these specs are not really comparable with a good desktop version of specific games, which you also play on the handheld. Both consoles can be used docked. The Switch 2 really wins in this case because it supports 4K 60fps HDR for quality and also 1080p 120Hz HDR for performance, and this is a major improvement over the original Switch capabilities. The Steam Deck is limited to 900p when docked, though it still works well as a media center or maybe secondary gaming device, but it is not as impressive as the Switch 2. So overall, the Switch 2 has the advantage in frame rate and handheld display smoothness, and especially docked as like a primary console, it definitely wins over the Steam Deck. However, the Steam Deck offers a more powerful display when it comes to OLED options and LCD option if you really want to not spend too much money, and is better suited for demanding PC games in general. So both have their strengths and it depends what's more important to you. Frame rate, smooth gameplay or visual richness in OLED and gaming power to play PC games, I would say. When it comes to choosing between the Nintendo Switch 2 and the Steam Deck, one of the biggest factors is the game availability and performance. Let's break down how both consoles handle game libraries and the gaming experiences they offer. Starting with the Nintendo Switch 2, it continues to shine with Nintendo's exclusive games. Of course, we have Zelda, Super Mario and Metroid, and the fans will find themselves right at home, as Nintendo's first-party titles are always well optimized for the Switch and also unique for the Switch. The Switch 2 will also be backwards compatible with existing Switch games, and many will get Switch 2 edition upgrades. This will improve graphics and performance. However, when it comes to third-party games, the Switch 2 might struggle, especially with AAA titles. We've seen that as well on the first Switch. The performance was not always great. Another thing about the upgrades to the Switch 2, the Switch 2 edition upgrades, they will cost money, and that can vary between $1 to $20 US. Also a little bit shady, but then again, we also seen this on the PlayStation 4 to 5 in example. So yeah, it's a little bit what it is. Although you might see some third-party games now being released on Switch 2, quite big titles, they often don't perform at the same levels as one more powerful consoles, an example like a PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X, and the graphics are usually scaled back to accommodate to the hardware. So while the Switch 2 excels at delivering great first-party content, it probably has its limits as well, especially later on when it comes to third-party game performance. This has always been a little bit of the issue with Nintendo consoles. We've seen it at the Wii U, we've seen it now also at the Switch, and we expect to also happen on the Switch too. The Steam Deck, on the other hand, doesn't have like first-party only titles because this is a PC-powered handheld that gives you access to the entire Steam library. This means not only can you play AAA games like Cyberpunk, Red Dead Redemption 2, The Witcher 3, but you can also access a massive library of other games like indie games, and the Steam Deck can easily handle more demanding titles thanks to its custom optimized AMD APU, and also a lot of times there are specific Steam Deck profiles for PC games. In addition, you can also install Windows on the Steam Deck, and with that you can of course pretty much access anything you want, like Epic Game Store, Ubisoft or EA Oranges, giving you pretty much unlimited selection of games. Another thing is that the Steam Deck also supports Xbox games, but that's pretty much the strategy of Microsoft, but also supports Xbox Game Pass, meaning you can play hundreds of games through a subscription rather than buying them each individually. And on cherry on top, nowadays PlayStation games are increasingly being ported to PC, which means you will get access to PlayStation exclusives like God of War, Spider-Man, and now The Last of Us Part 2 has been released also with a Steam Deck profile specifically to run optimal on the Steam Deck. So that is something that will never ever come to the Switch 2. In terms of performance, the Steam Deck takes the lead, I would say. Its custom AMD APU can handle very demanding PC games at higher frame rates and settings than the Switch 2 can manage. The Steam Deck also supports upscaling technologies, an example AMD FSR 4, which boosts frame rates without compromising the graphics. The Switch 2, while it is excellent for most Nintendo first-party exclusive games, it simply can't really match the Steam Deck performance in terms of running third-party titles. Maybe at first I would say a lot of the third-party games which are about to be released for Switch 2, they are, I would say, are pretty well optimized, but we know from our track record that third-party developers usually don't show that much love for Nintendo Switch, Wii U, etc, and it will probably be the same for the Switch 2. So to sum everything up, the Switch 2 is perfect of course for Nintendo first-party games and the Switch ecosystem. Also, there are some great third-party games being released at launch, but the track record showed unfortunately that eventually third-party developers will pretty much pass on or don't really put their best efforts into optimizing games for the Switch 2. If you want to have all game variety, you want to have of course the Steam Deck for all Steam games, PC games, Xbox Game Pass, and even PlayStation port titles, which are actually optimized, which come with optimized profiles, I should say, for the Steam Deck. So yeah, that's pretty much up to you what you like in this section. Now we come to one of the biggest, if not the biggest difference between the Switch 2 and the Steam Deck: pricing and value. So when it comes to choosing between the Switch 2 and the Steam Deck, pricing and value for money are very crucial factors to consider, now even more than ever. So let's take a look at the controversy and the prices, especially regarding the Switch 2 of course, of both consoles and break down what you get for the cost. So the Nintendo Switch 2 is priced at $470 for the 265GB model, and for that price you're getting a hybrid console with an upgraded 7.9-inch LCD screen, so no OLED, 1080p resolution. You have however 120Hz refresh rate and 4K 60fps HDR output when it is docked. This makes the Switch 2 very good regarding specs and also a solid choice for Nintendo fans want the latest and greatest from the Switch and Nintendo ecosystem. However, I would say one of the biggest drawbacks is the price of Nintendo games. Digital games on the Switch 2 are generally priced now around $80, and physical copies can go up to $90. This was very controversial. Not per se only that these are the launch prices, but Nintendo games usually never go in discount. This means that these prices for games which are 4 or 5 years old will stay the same, and that for me is the biggest turn down of getting the Switch 2. I mean, I usually like to wait for a single player game, not per se for the price, but because I know after a half year usually a lot of patches have happened, and also the games will be cheaper then, as a little bit of double reward. However, I know with Nintendo this is never possible, because these games will stay the same price for 4 or 5 years. And that's very unfortunate, because on Steam sales, PC in general with the keys, you have way cheaper games when it comes to the Steam Deck. I mean, sometimes games go in sale for like 70-80%, and that is nothing you will ever see on the Switch 2. So go to the official pricing for the Steam Deck. Let's start with the console. The Steam Deck starts at $419 for the 265 gigabytes LCD model. However, I would say you definitely want to pay $569, because then you will get the 512 gigabytes OLED model. And if you really have lots of money to spend, you can spend $697 for the 1 terabyte model. Also comes in OLED. So while the initial price of the Steam Deck is similar for the first one, it's a bit more expensive for the OLED one, but what sets it apart is definitely game pricing. The Steam Deck gives you access to the Steam sales, all the other cheap keys, and you can find insane discounts, of course. And also it has access to pretty much any game you want, including Xbox games, Xbox Game Pass, and PlayStation ported games to PC. This makes the Steam Deck much more affordable option in the long run when it comes to buying games. Even I would go as far as saying you can even emulate games like your for the Switch 1 an example, which is really insane. So additionally, also the Steam Deck supports the Xbox Game Pass, which is for some people also an option, because it gives you so much access to AAA games just to try, and this is something the Nintendo Switch never will have. I mean, they even have a monthly service just for their music. So to wrap it up, if you're looking for the best value for money, of course the Steam Deck wins this hands down. And I would say the Switch 2 is only a great option if you really can't miss Nintendo games. For third-party games, don't buy the Steam Deck. Unless you really want a hybrid console which you can connect to your TV for optimal performance as well. And you take agreement with the limited amount of third-party games which are usually being released on the Switch, especially if you compare that with the Steam Deck. So after comparing Nintendo Switch 2 and the Steam Deck, which one should you buy? Let's break it down quickly to help you decide which one is right for you. It is very obvious, of course, if you are a Nintendo fan who loves their exclusive games like Zelda, Mario, Metroid, you need to have the Switch 2 because it's only exclusive on Nintendo platforms. Also, the Switch 2 offers a great hybrid design that lets you play very well handheld, but also docked with the 60 FPS 4K HDR. So this is really good if you want to play either on the go or on your TV. However, third-party games optimization can be a little bit poorer than it is on the PC or the Steam Deck, and also the cost of games are pretty bad when it comes to not ever going to discount. So $80 for digital only, $90 for physical copies. Same also applies for third-party games mostly, especially AAA. And again, these rarely go into a discount. On the other hand, if you're looking for more variety, better value, especially when it comes to game pricing, the Steam Deck might definitely be the better pick. I would say even if you are unsure what you want from a handheld, of course I would say the Steam Deck is better. You only would like to have the Switch 2 if you really care about hybrid gaming or Nintendo first party titles. Also, starting at $419, the Steam Deck is even cheaper than the Switch 2, but I would say you definitely want to have the OLED version of the Steam Deck because it also comes with 512 gigabytes and you have a 90Hz display. Also, the Steam Deck, like mentioned earlier, you have access to the entire Steam library, and even on Windows you have access to Xbox games, Xbox Game Pass, and PlayStation games through the PC ports. The ability to access frequent sales for Steam or any key sites, of course, really outshine the Switch 2, that you have such cheaper games. And yeah, I would say on the long run, this can really end up in the hundreds of dollars of discount versus the Switch 2. So ultimately, if you're someone who values Nintendo's exclusive games and really want to have them, or really care very much about hybrid gaming, because I would say the Steam Deck is not the best choice for hybrid gaming, you want to have the Switch 2. I would say in any other case, you want to have the Steam Deck, especially because of its way cheaper games and way more flexibility when it comes to OS choice and Xbox games, Game Pass, and PlayStation ports. So it's up to you what you would like. I would say both devices are great, and I would say if you love this video, please like and subscribe, and see you at one of my next videos.